Okay, so I just finished reading The Catcher in the Rye by JD Salinger, and I think you should give it a go. So it's been on my shelf for a few years now, and I just couldn't get around to reading it because I thought it'd be like one of those books we had to read in school. So it was just sitting there, and a lot of the reviews online, they were quite mixed. Some people were saying it's overrated, some people were saying it's a red flag, not just the book, but if you read the book, you're a red flag. And a lot of people were saying it's amazing. So I kind of went in with these mixed reviews, and I'm glad I read this book because I quite enjoyed it. So this story is pretty much told through the voice of Holden Caulfield, who is a 16-year-old kid, and something happens at his school. And so the story follows the few days after that event where he's wandering around in New York City. And that's pretty much the whole story of this book. And it might sound a bit mundane and normal, and it kind of is, but it doesn't feel boring, right? You get this opposite effect where you want to know what happens, you want to know what goes on. So if you're someone who enjoys action-heavy books, very plot-driven, story-driven, you're probably not going to like this one. But if you're someone who enjoys character-driven books, I think you'll like this one. So one of the reasons I really like this book was how raw and honest the narration felt. Right? It doesn't feel like one of those classic books where it's so formal and poetic and you're reading it and you think to yourself, like, do I even understand English? Dostoevsky. It feels like a regular teenager is having a chat with you and telling you about his life, right? You kind of get this feeling that you're a therapist and you're just sitting there and this kid is telling you about what happened this one time. And because it feels so real, the themes in this book hit even harder, I think. You can really feel Holden's frustration, his loneliness, and that feeling of not fitting in. And I guess that's one of the reasons why a lot of people find this book to be quite depressing. And it is, yes, it is pretty depressing. But also I think that it's quite honest about what it feels like to grow up and not fit in. The story doesn't have some crazy plot or twist. It's more about the feelings, the thoughts, and the stuff that people don't usually say out loud. And that's probably why it makes it such a special book, a timeless book. It feels even relatable today. Also, a big plus is that it's not a long book, right? It's quite short and simple and quite easy to read. Salinger's writing style is quite accessible and straightforward. It is also quite philosophical in nature, but it's not difficult to read. Right? He makes you think about your own life, your own teenage years growing up. So yeah, if you're someone who wants to start reading classics, I think this is the place to start. Or if you're a performative male who wants to look deep out in public spaces, this is probably the book as well. Although you might get called a red flag, so yeah, be careful with that. Okay, so now onto the spoiler part. So Holden gets kicked out of his school right before Christmas, and instead of going back to his parents' house, he wanders off to New York. He stays at these hotels, he goes to bars, he meets random people, he even tries reconnecting with his old teachers and mates. But none of this really goes in his favour. And you can really see that he's struggling mentally, right? He's depressed, he's confused, and he's lonely the entire time. And he even ends up sneaking to his parents' house just to see his sister Phoebe, who's the only person that he really cares about and trusts. So on the surface, it doesn't look like there's much happening in this book, but I don't think this book is about what's happening. It's more about what Holden is going through, what's going on in his head. And I guess that's where the meaning comes from. So Holden hates this idea of people being phony, right? He hates fakeness. He hates how pretentious adults can be. But the sad part is, he's also phony sometimes. Right? He lies, he judges, he pushes people away. And I guess that's what makes him so real. But at the same time, he's quite frustrating. Deep down, he's just a kid who's scared of growing up. How he talks about wanting to be the catcher in the rye, where he's standing in a rye field and he imagines catching these kids that are about to fall off the cliff. And I guess the cliff here kind of represents losing innocence, and the rye field represents childhood. So it's basically his dream to protect kids from growing up, from losing their innocence, something he wishes someone had done for him. And when you're reading this book, you kind of realise a big part of Holden's pain comes from losing his brother Ali. You can tell that he never really processed that grief in his heart and in his mind. And I guess that's one of the reasons he's so obsessed with innocence. You know, he's trying to hold on to something pure that he's already lost, something that's never going to come back. And I guess to combat that, he, wears this red hunting hat, which symbolises kind of safety for him. And that's why he wears that all the time, because he feels safe when he's wearing that hat. It makes him feel unique and protected from the rest of the world. He also loves going to the museum because nothing really changes there. Everything stays the same. Unlike the real world where everything's changing and growing, he loves that about the museum because that is how he wants the world to be. He doesn't want the world to lose its innocence. And these themes continue throughout the whole story. And the end is kind of where the turning point is, where he's standing there watching his sister Phoebe on a carousel. It's like he finally accepts that he can't protect her forever. He's got to let her grow up, and that's okay. And so for the first time, he feels some kind of happiness inside of him. He feels at peace. And after all this, we kind of find out that he's telling this whole story from some mental hospital or a rest facility. It's never fully explained, but I guess that makes sense. He's finally starting to talk about what happened, and he's starting to face that monster. It's not a perfectly happy ending, but it feels hopeful that at the end he's going to be okay. So yeah, that's pretty much The Catcher in the Rye. And obviously I've missed a lot of stuff here, but for that you'll have to read the book. For me, I would give it about 4.25 stars. It's not a perfect book, but it's one that sticks with you. It's quite short, it's quite simple and straightforward, and it makes you think about your own life and growing up. Our main character, Holden, can be quite annoying at times and frustrating, but I think that's what makes the book feel so real and human. He's messy and he's confused, just like all of us have been at some point, and I think that honesty is probably what makes the book so timeless and relatable even now. So yeah, read this book, and I'll see you in the next one.